Good morning, everybody. How are you today? We are back for another Bible reading. And as you know, we go through different stories of the Bible for people who don't know the stories, have never read them, only know bits and pieces of them, have forgotten them. We believe that it is everybody's right to know what it says inside this book. And that's why we do this. That's why I read these stories to you. Recently, we had gone through the whole book of Romans rather than doing an actual story. And now I've decided that we're going to pick out different parts, different stories, different pieces so that we can start filling in the gaps. We've gone through many books of the Bible. We went through Genesis when we first started this. We've gone through 1st and 2nd Kings. No, I'm sorry. 1st and 2nd Samuel. We've done parts of Kings. We looked at the book of Ruth. We've looked at so many different books. And now we're going to look at just different stories here and there. But I want to point out one of Jesus's teachings, something that he talked about in his ministry. And it comes out of Matthew chapter 23. So now remember, Jesus is going around. He has, at this point, collected a crowd around him. It's right before he gets ready to tell them that the temple's going to be destroyed. And he's really amping up his teachings now. He's calling people out. He's saying like it is. He's not holding anything back. So Matthew 23, we're going to read part of this. It says, "Then Jesus spoke to the crowds and to his disciples. The scribes and the Pharisees are seated in the chair of Moses. Therefore, do whatever they tell you and observe it, but don't do what they do, because they don't practice what they teach. They tie up heavy loads that are hard to carry and put them on people's shoulders, but they themselves aren't willing to lift a finger to move them. They do everything to be seen by others. They enlarge their phylacteries and lengthen their tassels. They love the place of honor at banquets, the front seats in the synagogues, greetings in the marketplaces, and to be called rabbi by people. But you are not to be called rabbi, because you have one teacher, and you are all brothers and sisters. Do not call anyone on earth your father, because you have one Father who is in heaven. You are not to be called instructors either, because you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces, for you don't go in, and you don't allow those entering to go in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to make one convert, and when he becomes one, you make him twice as fit for hell as you are. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, 'Whoever takes an oath by the temple,' it means nothing, but 'whoever takes an oath by the gold of the temple is bound by his oath.' Blind fools! For which is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctified the gold? Also, whoever takes an oath by the altar, it means nothing, but whoever takes an oath by the gift that is on the altar is bound by this oath. Blind people! For which is greater, the gift of the altar that sanctifies the gift? Therefore, the one who takes an oath by the altar takes an oath by it and by everything on it. The one who takes an oath by the temple takes an oath by it and by him who dwells in it. And the one who takes an oath by heaven takes an oath by God's throne and by him who sits on it. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You pay a tenth of mint, dill, and cumin, and yet you have neglected the more important matters of the law: justice, mercy, and faithfulness. These things should have been done without neglecting the others. Blind guides! You strain out a gnat, but gulp down a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee! First clean the outside of the cup, so that the outside of it may also be clean. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which appear to be beautiful on the outside, but inside are full of bones of the dead and every kind of impurity. In the same way, on the outside you seem righteous to people, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You build the tombs of the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous. And you say, if we had lived in the days of our ancestors, we wouldn't have taken part with them in shedding the prophets' blood. So you testify against yourself that you are descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your ancestors' sins. Snakes, brood of vipers, how can you escape being condemned to hell? This is why I am sending you prophets, sages, and scribes. Some of them you will kill and crucify, and some of them you will flog in your synagogues and pursue from town to town. So all the righteous blood shed on the earth will be charged to you, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Truly I tell you, all these things will come on this generation. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her, how often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate, for I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. That's the end of Matthew 23. This happens to be one of my favorite chapters because Jesus is saying so much here. So remember, there are three ways that we look at these scriptures when we read them. One, what does it say? You have to have reading comprehension. If you don't know what it says in here, you don't know what it says in here. Two, what was it saying to the people of the time? What was the culture, the history? We have to understand who it was written to, what he's talking about. And three, what, if anything, is it saying to us today? Well, we just read it. We're going to dissect it just a little bit here. Jesus is speaking to both his disciples and to the crowd that has gathered together. There are Pharisees there. There are Sadducees there. These are important people. There are rabbis there. There are people who are important in the temple. They have legal rights. They administer the law to the people. They tell the people what they can and can't do. These are important people. They're the governing body. And Jesus is calling them out. So first he's saying that the scribes and the Pharisees, they sit on the seat of Moses, which was sort of a seat of honor in the temple. And he says to them, he says, you guys, do whatever they tell you to do. Do what they tell you to do, but do not do what they do. So this is a case of do as I say, not as I do. And Jesus is telling them, do what they're telling you. They're trying to teach you the word, but do not do what they do. And then he goes on to describe some of the things that they do. One of them was they tie up heavy loads that are hard to carry and put them on people's shoulders. So they would ask people to literally carry things for them. And they'd be, heavy loads that they were asking these people to carry, but they were too important to lift a finger to do anything like manual labor. Oh, that was beneath them. But they would expect other people to be treated this way. They love to be seen. It says they enlarge their phylacteries. They had these robes, and they would just spread their robes out and make themselves look so grand and so pompous. And they loved to be called rabbi because it was a position of honor. And he's telling his disciples here, he says, don't worry about being called rabbi. You don't need to be called rabbi. You don't need to exalt yourself anymore. You're just another human being. We're all brothers and sisters. You have the same God. We have the same Father. You have the Messiah who teaches you. You're nobody special. You're not better than anybody else, is what he is saying. So don't act like it. Then he addresses his discussion, if you will, to the scribes and Pharisees. See, right now he's been talking to his his disciples, tell him, don't be like them. And then he looks at them and he says, and this is what you're doing wrong. This is what you're doing. He says, you are making an oath. You're telling people to take an oath on the gold of the temple rather than make an oath on the temple. The gold is nothing. Then basically it's an idol. At that point, it becomes an idol. So it's idol worship. And he's listing all of these things that they are doing, calls them blind Pharisees. I'm wondering, though, if at some point he must have turned to one particular Pharisee and directed his comment to him specifically, because if you will look at 23:26, he says blind Pharisee, singular, not plural. And he says, first, clean the inside of the cup so that the outside of it may also be clean. Then he goes back to address scribes, plural, and Pharisees, plural, in the next verse. And he says, hypocrites, you are all like whitewashed tombs, which appear beautiful on the outside, but inside are full of the bones of the dead and every kind of impurity. So he says to them, you might look good on the outside, dudes, but you're ugly on the inside. You might have all these wonderful robes and this following of people, and you may go off and find converts, but then all you're doing is leading them to hell. He says, you are ugly people on the inside. Calls them snakes, calls them a brood of vipers. How can you escape being condemned to hell? He said, this is why I am sending you prophets, sages, scribes, and some of them you will kill. And he goes on to predict not only his own death, but the death of the disciples that come after him, after he's risen and ascended to heaven. He knows that they have killed the scribes in the past, even though they've said, oh, if we had lived back then, we would never have killed the prophets back then. We're better people than that. And he's like, are you kidding? You're no better than them. You're killing the ones now. You're going to kill the ones after me. You're going to kill me. You're not better than them. So he's really calling them out here. I don't know what this may have said to you or spoken to you. This chapter is not one that, what happens too many times, I think, is people take this chapter and they go and apply it to other people and they go, oh, that guy thinks he's better than everybody. Look at him. Instead of applying it to themselves and being humble in themselves. My dog is barking. Hey. Instead of being humble for themselves, they apply it to everybody else. And that is exactly what Jesus is teaching them not to do right here. So I find this to be quite interesting. He is teaching his Pharisees, he's teaching his disciples how not to be. He's speaking truth into a situation. He's saying, look, you guys aren't any better than anybody else. And so we have a tendency, like I said, sometimes to look at so-and-so and so-and-so and go, oh, they think they're better than everybody. Look at them. They're all pompous and they have all these positions and they treat people badly and blah, 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 blah. Instead of putting the focus on ourselves and saying, you know what? I just won't be like that. I'll be more like what Jesus told me to be. So that's what I get out of Matthew 23. It's quite a lesson that Jesus is teaching. He holds nothing back. He looks them in the eye, I imagine, and tells it like it is. Well, I hope you got something out of today's reading. I look forward to us reading again together next time. In the meantime, have a great day. God bless you.